We're back in California, visiting with Kerri Steenwerth, a research soil scientist with the Crops Pathology and Genetics Research Unit in Davis, California. Steenwerth's research focuses on developing sustainable grape production systems and practices at a time when weather extremes are becoming more frequent.
Wine grapes are sensitive to changes in temperature because temperature will affect the ripening process. It'll affect the accumulation of sugars in the grapes. It will affect how stressed they get in terms of their water stress. This influences how growers have to manage the vineyard. We've already seen in the past summer that we're experiencing more frequent and more intense heat events during the wine grape production period. And so growers have to figure out how to manage that. That could be anywhere from changing the variety that they're growing in the vineyard. It could be that they are applying more irrigation or mist to cool the vines. Every option is on the table right now.
Grape growers are facing a myriad of issues due to altering and unpredictable weather conditions. Extreme drought and barrages of rainfall all at once can wipe out entire vineyards. But there's also subtle weather changes going on that are causing issues for grape growers. For example, Steenwerth said she's seeing temperatures rising earlier in the growing season, which is causing the buds to open earlier than anticipated. This can have major ramifications for growers because the wine growing process is reliant upon a strict schedule.
When there are heat events earlier in the season, like during bloom, that can cause significant impacts to the grape development. We don't want the grapes to be stressed during the beginning of the season. But during those times, we may also experience extreme heat events and the vines will shut down, meaning that they're feeling stressed from the heat. They're feeling stressed from not having sufficient water. Growers can manage this by applying more water, but that's not a long-term solution either.
Cooler temperatures can also be problematic if it's not anticipated. Cooling events can slow down the ripening process and sugar accumulation. And it's not just the daytime temperatures that can fluctuate and wreak havoc on grapes. Some areas, like Sonoma, Napa, and Russian River Valley, rely on consistently warm days and cool nights. But researchers have observed nighttime temperatures that are increasing.
The differential between the day and the night is lower. And that has also been implicated in some changes in the long-term viability of growing Pinot Noir, for example, or Chardonnay, the grapes that are typically grown in those coastal regions. Questions that are faced by the industry: should we be looking at other kinds of varieties that do well, that are grown in the Rhone regions of Spain? The market is not necessarily familiar with those varieties, even though they're delicious. And so that is a different issue for the industry is, will the wine drinking climate, will it be favorable for these new varieties that might do better in our emerging climate?
Wine growers are asking tough questions, and Steenwerth and her colleagues are trying to find the answers. That's not always easy, though, because researchers often need to conduct tests in the fields, and grape growers may not be able to afford giving up part of their vineyard for study. That's why Steenwerth's research is so valuable. Through a grant by the Foundation for Food and Agricultural Research, known as FAR, Steenwerth and her colleagues are partnering with the University of California, Davis and Jackson Family Wines. The goal is to conduct in-field studies to determine best management practices to adapt to a shifting and at times extreme climate. Mainly, they're studying regenerative viticulture practices, which is similar to regenerative farming or farming with sustainability and the environment in mind. Regenerative farming focuses on building and sustaining healthy soil, and it's not a new practice. It's been adopted by most wine growers for decades. These practices include composting wine grape waste, row cover cropping, and employing livestock to cut down weeds and leftover cover crops and provide nutrient-rich manure. Many of these practices have been studied exclusively, but Steenwerth and her colleagues want to know if stacking these practices can improve soil health.
The focus of this project is combining these different practices together to identify if we can get basically more bang for the buck. We have studies on compost. We have studies on tillage versus no tillage. We have cover cropping. This particular project is combining those into a system. Researchers refer to this as stacking practices in order to get a larger outcome, more organic matter stored, better nutrient retention, better water infiltration. That's the unique part of this particular study.
Steenwerth is currently using the FAR project to see how regenerative farming practices can help build a sustainable future for wine grape growing. This is key because you need a lot of different vines with different soil makeups and climate zones to really quantify if these practices are beneficial and to whom.
It's hugely valuable. One of the challenges of working in wine grape production is that it occurs all over California in many different microclimates, many different soil types. So one of the responses that we often get when we're presenting results is like, yeah, okay, but that's in the coastal region. I'm working in the Central Valley. How does that relate to what I'm doing? It's really helpful to have trials at the same time in different regions with the same practices. And this project is allowing us to do that. We've never been able to do that before.
Steenwerth is also testing the practicality of some alternative management practices, like growing cover crops under the vines. It's an interesting concept, and I'll have her explain how it works.
In a vineyard, we have the alleyway, which is between the vines, and that typically has cover on it. And that reduces erosion. During these big rainfall events, we're no longer getting rainfall coming in these nice measured amounts of water that can have good infiltration. We're having big pineapple expresses that are coming in and dumping lots of water and flooding. If we don't have cover on the vineyard, we will have a lot of off-site erosion. Under the vine, there's no vegetation. Typically, it's kept clean so that none of the weeds are being harvested. If they're using machine harvests, they don't want to have vegetation up into the wine grape canopy from tall weeds shading out the sun. Having cover under the vine, if it was stable, it could do a few things for growers. If it was a composition of grass species that they wanted that would outcompete the weeds that they don't want, if it was low growing, then it wouldn't be in the canopy and they wouldn't have to worry about these tall weeds under the vine. If it built soil organic matter under the vine, then it would encourage good soil structure, so there's less erosion and more water going into the soil profile during the period when we should be filling up the soil profile when the vines are dormant.
These studies should help define how stacking regenerative farming practices and other novel ideas, like growing cover crops under the vines, will affect the soil microbiome, which is a community of microorganisms that live in the soil, similar to the human gut. This is a major focus of Steenwerth's research.
I think this FAR project has allowed us to move to a really interesting area of research because growers are being told, oh, your microbiome matters. You need to pay attention. You need to feed it. But we're still really at the cusp of being able to look at what are the microbes doing and are you actually getting the function that we're telling you in terms of what individual microbes are doing or a community of microbes are doing. We can see these large response variables. We can see that cover crops are building soil organic matter. We can see that they're building aggregate stability. They are improving infiltration. Compost is doing the same. We're seeing that in some preliminary evidence that these regenerative practices are also creating slightly cooler soil conditions during the summer. That's why I think this project has also really been helpful. It's laying a foundation for additional work.
All this wine research is making me thirsty and hungry. Stay tuned for our final episode, where we learn that wine grapes aren't just for sipping.